All right, guys, here we go. Big time fired up here. Mike Gonsalves, first of all, from the Wellness Bucket. Hugely excited to have Brooke Benlifer with us today. You guys, I'm going to introduce her here in a second, but you guys probably know Brooke. She's like our registered, resident registered dietitian at the Wellness Bucket, probably from the inception, literally from since we first started. So you have been such a huge part of the Wellness Bucket, Brooke. So it's so good to have you here today. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Of course. Quick introduction. You are a registered dietitian. We just said that. Cornell University graduate and mother of twins. How old are they now?
Almost 3.
Almost 3. Man, time flies. Mother of twins and passionate about preventative health through optimal nutrition. And the last one, which I think you and I, which we get along for a lot of reasons, but you're committed to helping people live healthier, more fulfilling lives. And that's, we see eye to eye on so much. And that's why I'm so excited to have you here today because, when we're talking about entrepreneurship, right, and creating a healthy mind, healthy body to create a healthy business, and a thing or two about entrepreneurship yourself because of your own coaching, nutritional practices and coaching practices. So there's something to be said about food as well, and I should always say healthy mind, body, healthy stomach, healthy business. But I wanted to talk to you today about just optimal nutrition, because it's one of the things sometimes that goes by, pun intended, by the wayside where we kind of we're so busy with getting our business off the ground or keeping it going or developing it, whatever, that we either don't take care of ourselves from a nutritional standpoint, or we want to, but we just don't know how to. So that's why I'm fired up to chat with you today because I know you, man. We've known each other for 10 plus years and you're this wealth of knowledge in my go-to whenever I have nutritional questions. So I'm excited. You ready to do this?
Thank you. I'm ready to go.
All right. So what I'm excited about too, Brooke, is the fact that you and I chatted before this is keeping the stuff we're going to cover practical, easy, real world, effective stuff, stuff that people can use. And that's why you always put it in that context. So out of the gate, I want to ask you, because I actually struggle with this for myself sometimes. It's I'm out and about seeing clients doing whatever. When it comes to snacks, right? Healthy snacks. What are a few healthy go-to snacks? And I want to emphasize healthy, quick go-to that you can have with you at home. If you're in the middle of typing something, going to see a client. What's some healthy go-to snacks?
Okay. So I had trouble sticking with just a few, so I'm going to name a bunch. But basically, any type of fruit. The easiest are apples, pears, bananas, peaches, and then pairing that with a nut butter packet. So those Justin's tear apart packets of nut butter, or you could just buy a jar of peanut butter and put a little bit in a half-cup container and keep it with you. But having some fruit and some protein is excellent. They also make coconut butter packets for people who don't like nut butter. Oftentimes what I'll do is just buy a rotisserie chicken and pull off a piece, wrap it up, bring that as a snack. So it's just an easy source of quick protein, very inexpensive, and you can buy them, organic or non-organic, depending on what price range you want to deal with. Doing some kind of Greek yogurt with nuts or throwing a little seeds on there, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, whatever you have on hand, pumpkin seeds. Doing a deli veggie roll-up, so taking a slice of lettuce, slice of turkey, and a slice of cheese and just rolling it up. That's an excellent source of a few carbs, some protein, and some healthy fat. Doing any vegetables that you have on hand. The most easy ones are bell pepper, celery, and carrots. And then pairing that with a little bit of guacamole, salsa, hummus, anything like that. And all of those things come in snack size packs. So if you want to pay a little bit more for the convenience of it, if it makes you eat a little bit more healthy, that's great. Any kind of jerky. So salmon jerky, beef jerky, turkey jerky. Doing just plain nuts, any kind of nut. And doing, I'd say, a quarter cup to a half a cup would be that's 1 to 2 servings. So a quarter cup would be about the size of an Altoids tin. So if you think about that, and just fill it up with nuts, about 23, 24 almonds, that's about 1 serving. So, or a closed handful is a serving. A sweet potato. So a lot of times in advance, I'll just cook up a bunch of sweet potatoes. And then when they're done, wrap them in foil, keep them in the fridge, take one on the go. Excellent source if you need some quick carbohydrates. They're fairly slow digesting, but they're more rapidly digesting than having carrots or bell peppers, that kind of thing. Coconut chips, plantain chips, edamame. You can buy already shelled edamame in the refrigerated section in most stores, or you can buy the dry roasted edamame. any kind of gluten-free chips and having that again with some salsa, guac, or hummus. Trail mix. You can buy trail mix or you can make your own. It's really easy to make your own, and then you can kind of personalize it to what you like. So you can go to the store and buy from the bulk bins just a variety of nuts and a variety of dried fruits. I wouldn't add the chips to that. I don't think you need any of the chips in there because the dried fruit is sweet enough and has the natural sugars. So that's a good idea. Pre-portioned cheese. It doesn't have to be the string cheese. You could even just buy a block of cheese and then just, again, like pre-portion it yourself ahead of time when you do a meal prep on a Sunday and bring that with you. And if you're traveling, a greens powder is something that's pretty inexpensive. So what I mean by that is they have powdered greens that come in like just a little canister and a scoop of that. You could have it with almond milk, coconut milk, water, whatever. But a lot of times when you're traveling, you don't get near as many vegetables as you would on a regular basis. So that kind of just ensures that you're getting some of those micronutrients. And then the last one is just, I call it pop top fish. So they have it for tuna, salmon, sardines, anything. It's just the canned fish, but it has a little pop top on it. They also have it in a pouch. So you don't need to bring a can opener with you, and you can just get a really, really quick source of protein that doesn't need to be refrigerated ahead of time.
Man, that's, let there no longer be any excuse why there's no like, I don't know what to have. I mean, we just listed off about 15 things, and that was phenomenal. You know what I love there, Brooke, is two things that came to mind. Is one, is the fact that it doesn't have to be like sometimes like a conventional, I should say, it doesn't have to be a conventional snack. We always think, a snack should be something where it's like, it doesn't have, like you said, hey, take like a turkey, right, pull off a piece, bring it with you in a bag or something. It doesn't have to be a conventional kind of snack like, like just nuts. Like just think of what's healthy. Everything you just said is phenomenal. So it doesn't have to be conventional. It can be a little bit different, like you're not your normal quote unquote snack, but it's healthy. And another thing that I took out of that, Brooke, is this, it's almost like kind of like being prepared, having what you need to like, you need to have the chicken to break off a piece to have it, have the nuts at home, have the stuff you need, like that green powder, like have it available. That's, planning ahead, making sure you have it. But then when you have it, goodness gracious, you just, look at all the options we have, right? I mean, it's wild.
And one thing that I always tell people to do is, I mean, first of all, it saves money, but you can always get bars, but bars usually aren't as satisfying as eating some real food. And real food tends to be a lot less expensive. So one thing that you can do when you're traveling, there's always going to be, unless you're out in the middle of nowhere, there's usually going to be a supermarket nearby. And it might not be a Whole Foods or a natural food store, but you can always find fruits, vegetables, protein, some carbs there that are going to be healthy. So hitting up a supermarket when you first get to whatever your destination is a great idea. Even if you have to go every couple days, it's still a lot less expensive than relying on a restaurant.
Guys, you just hear that, cheaper and healthier. You don't hear that too often. You just said, hey, man, it's usually cheaper and healthier.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, right? It's usually like, if it's healthier, it's going to be more expensive. No, that's not the case there, right? Thank you for that, Brooke. That was awesome. Next up, you know what I want to talk about is because I've gotten a lot of questions on this, is when it comes to frozen meals, right? Sometimes they're just a convenient option, like frozen meals, and there's always like, hey, packaged foods, you shouldn't have packaged foods, it's not the healthiest. What's your thoughts on like frozen, if you have to have it, if you're going to have it, are there healthy frozen food? What's your whole thought on the frozen food for a meal scenario?
I think there's some very healthy options. There's a number of brands that I actually mentioned that are really, really decent in terms of ingredients. Amy's brand, Engine 2, Kashi, Evil, Luvo. Those have fewer ingredients than some of the other processed meals that tend to have 50 ingredients. In general, if you don't remember the names of these, the fewer ingredients, the better. So if you see 50 ingredients, you probably want to steer clear of that. The other thing to look for is just the sodium content can be sky high. They do that to, make it a preservative and also add flavor, but really it's not as good for you. The one thing I would say is that always keeping frozen vegetables on hand is a really, really easy way to bulk up any frozen meal. So if you're having a prepared meal, they tend to be small portions. That's the benefit, is that they are pretty portion controlled. They usually tend to be not super high in calories because they're much smaller than the portion you would get in any type of restaurant. That's the upside. The downside is that sometimes they're overly processed. But if you pair it with some frozen vegetables that you just keep in your freezer, it's a really, really way to add some micronutrients to that, bulk up your meal, make it more rich in fiber, and then end up with a healthier meal all around.
I love that. Let me ask you, you said, hey, watch for the sodium. So if I had to if we had to stick by a number, is this something, hey guys, stay at this or lower, or
I'd say try to stay under 500.
okay, under 500 grams or
Yeah, milligrams.
milligrams,
So
excuse me,
it's
milligrams.
just, and
Okay.
that can be a little bit challenging, but what you can do is if, for example, if you had some frozen broccoli, like a pound of frozen broccoli in your freezer, you could use the pound of frozen broccoli, steam that up, and then use, for example, if the meal was sky high in sodium, just cut that meal in half, have half of that with the whole package of frozen broccoli, and you're ending up with a much better meal overall.
Got it. So the two takeaways there is, one, the less ingredients, the better in it.
Yes.
And two, sodium count, if you can, stick with 500 milligrams or less of sodium.
Yes.
So awesome. I love that because it's usually, it is a convenience factor. Sometimes, I haven't done it in a while, but I'd be lying if I'm sure at some point we'll have a frozen meal. So it's always like, hey, what's the take on that? And that's a perfect thought. Now, let me ask you one more question, Brooke. If someone's, and I don't know if you can answer this, but in a 7-day stretch of a week, would you say, hey, it's okay, have it, it's okay to have frozen meals 2 times a week, 3 times, the less the better? What's your thought?
Oh yeah, I think 2 or 3 times a week is fine,
Okay.
depending again on the quality of the meal. But I think again, talking about preparing and setting yourself up ahead of time, if you can always make sure that you have frozen veggies in your freezer, that is going to put you one step ahead. Because then whatever frozen meal you have, you can add a veggie to it.
Perfect. Keep those.
So you're
frozen
lowering
veggies,
the overall, sodium content.
Got it. Keep those frozen. If you're gonna keep frozen foods, make a majority of them frozen veggies.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk energy. Energy is a biggie, right? Energy, like, hey, I need more energy. I need to get up, stay motivated. What are 3 and again, I want to go back to the word easy. What's 3 easy energy boosting foods someone can have on any given day? What are those? 3. What comes to mind for you?
My top 3 are berries,
Yep.
eggs, and nuts. So berries, again, you can get them year round. I mean, of course, summer is kind of the season for berries, but frozen berries are pretty inexpensive. And that kind of thing is a low glycemic fruit. So it's going to give you that carbohydrate for the energy, but it's not going to raise your blood sugar as much as a tropical fruit like pineapple or mango or anything like that, or even grapes. Nuts, huge variety, gives you some carbs, some protein, and a lot of healthy fat. That's going to give you kind of that long-lasting energy. Totally portable. Just again, pack it in a Ziploc bag, pack it in a little container, easy to go. You can stash it in your glove box in your car. No excuses. They even come pre-portioned.
Love that.
And then eggs, you can just hard boil them ahead of time. So that's another easy go ahead. I mean, buy a dozen eggs, hard boil them one day, and then you have them for the rest of the 4 or 5 days.
I absolutely love that. Berries, nuts, and eggs. Simple, right to the point, easy, practical, makes sense to me. I always go to I usually find myself whenever I go to Costco, it's I usually buy just giant thing of blueberries or raspberries, and I just feast on those throughout the week. Speaking of food and energy foods, let's talk calories now, because this is one I come across a lot. What's your take on when it comes to health and eating? Make sure you're eating enough, because sometimes the day gets the best of us. We're not having enough food. What's your take on tracking calories, on counting calories? What's your whole idea when it comes to calorie counting?
I think calorie counting is helpful as a gauge. I think it can drive some people crazy because it can make people very obsessive about food. But far and away, what's more important than calories is the quality of the food versus the quantity. So, and this is just kind of an outrageous example, but 2,000 calories of jelly beans is going to have a completely different physiological effect in your body as 2,000 calories of salmon, broccoli, nuts.
Come on.
So, your insulin is going to be sky high. Your blood sugar is going to be all over the place. You're going to feel like crap. You're going to not have any energy. You won't be able to sleep. Your sugar will be high, low, if you have that first component, the jelly beans. But so in that sense, and you could, even if, for example, someone needed technically 2,000 calories to maintain their weight, they could end up gaining weight having 1,600 calories worth of jelly beans because of the way that it reacts in the body and the blood sugar response. Whereas they could end up losing weight having the salmon, broccoli, etc., because those things actually can help to speed up your metabolism.
How interesting.
So, and you're not getting any fiber, you're not getting any micronutrients. What your body needs, what your body craves, more than calories is actually the nutrition and the nutrients. So when you eat these foods like the jelly beans that are devoid of nutrients, your body's constantly craving more and wanting more. But if you had 1,600 calories worth of the salmon, broccoli, etc., you might feel completely satisfied because you've met all of your needs or most of your needs.
Absolutely. It's like the golden rule, man, right? Quality over quantity. I mean, yeah, quantity is, it's important to some extent, but quality, nutritious, nourishing foods. I mean, that's what we're going after, not so much the quantity. So you're saying it's like, hey, man, calories are important. Of course, if someone's eating 800 calories in salmon and broccoli for the day, it's probably not enough. So
right.
There's a balance between if there's gonna be a focus, let the focus be on quality and not so much the quantity. Is that
yes.
your assessment?
And also because when you are eating these foods that are kind of empty calories, you're giving up that spot to something that's less nutritious where you could be having something that's nutritious in that place. So if you need a certain amount of calories to be giving it up to jelly beans and processed foods, you're taking away all those other nutrients that you could be getting if you had those same calories coming from something else.
Exactly, because I hear that often. But it was only 100 calories, and I always say, yeah, but 100 calories of what?
Right,
what nourishment did you get out of it? So that's a biggie. So that's from the food perspective, right? So next up, that's from a food perspective. So, and I'm a big fan of, hey man, nourish your body with healthy, nutritious foods. I subscribe to that same philosophy. You do as well, Brooke, obviously. When it comes to like vitamins, right? Like what's your, I'm curious, like what your take is on vitamins, and what are the top three? If someone's gonna say, hey man, I want a couple of vitamins because I want to it makes me feel good. What are your top three vitamins that you would say, hey, if you're gonna have vitamins, these are my top three go-tos?
So my perspective, in doing a lot of research on vitamins has changed over the years. I think that vitamins are pretty essential. So I think in today's diet, whether it's a combination of the soil not being as nutrient rich as it once was, and also people's busy lives, because stress actually depletes a lot of vitamins from your body, I do think that it's helpful for people to get vitamins through supplementation in addition to a healthy diet. I think it's pretty impossible to meet all of your macro and micronutrient needs through diet alone. So for that reason, I do recommend vitamins to people. I think that my top three would be multivitamin, vitamin D, and probiotics. And there are a few brands, and these are not sponsored in any way, shape, or form, but people are always saying, is Trader Joe's brand as good as X, Y, and Z, or store brand versus pharmaceutical grade brand. There are a few brands that stick out in my mind. One of them is called Thorne Research. It's THORNE, Thorne Research. Another one is Claire Labs, KLAIRE, Claire Labs. And the last one is Metagenics, METAGENICS. And then as far as fish oil, which is also helpful for a lot of people, those brands, some of them have fish oils, but they also make them through Nordic Naturals, which is an excellent brand too. It's NORDIC, Nordic Naturals.
So fish oil, that would be like your fourth. So the top three was multivitamin, vitamin D, and did you say probiotics?
Probiotics, yeah. And I wanted to say with fish oil is not right for everybody. You can certainly get a lot of omega-3 fatty acids through eating fish, but one of the reasons not to take fish oil is if you're anticipating surgery coming up, because fish oil in a therapeutic dose, which is what you're getting when you're taking a fish oil supplement versus just eating salmon, is a blood thinner. So that's why you'll see on any, fish oil bottle, they'll always say, if you're anticipating surgery, do not be taking fish oil.
Interesting. Okay, so have your fish oil, but if you're going into surgery, stay away from the fish oil. Brooke, one more. Actually, since you're on that, one more question. This is kind of off what I was what I wanted to ask you next. It just came to mind. Flaxseed oil, fish oil, like one better than the other. What's your thought on?
I'm a bigger fan of fish oil.
Okay.
Because it's better absorbed by the body. Then the flaxseed oil has to be converted. And that conversion process means that you're not getting quite the same micronutrients that you would be getting from taking a fish oil supplement.
Got it. So if you're if you're gonna have one, It's awesome. But if you're gonna pick one, if you had to pick one or the other, you're saying, hey man, go with fish oil, better for you, if you will. Okay. So going back to food. Went to vitamin for a second. I want to go back to food. When it comes to eating per day, right? I know we get tied up. Some people, I have breakfast and then I don't eat again until like late afternoon. So there's the whole idea like you should eat every couple of hours. What, in your opinion, what's ideal? Like in any given day, is it like, hey, just if you're eating lunch, breakfast, dinner, that's great. If you're having 5 times, or if you're eating every 3 hours, what's ideal times per day to be eating, Brooke?
I think everyone is different, but I kind of prescribe to the 3 meals a day, and then maybe an extra snack if you need 3 meals and 1 to 2 snacks. But the reason I say 3 meals is because if you're needing to eat 5 or 6 times a day, then in my mind, you're probably not eating enough at each of those 3 meals. So if you're eating enough at your meals, it should be able to last you 4 hours, 5 hours, possibly even 6. Or if you get to 6, you're not completely ravenous. You're hungry, but your blood sugar isn't crashing. And that's actually a good way to gauge also. So if if you have breakfast and you get to lunch and you are just feeling awful, you kind of have to look backwards. What did I have for breakfast? So you want to have a breakfast that's large enough, and it doesn't have to be at 7 a.m., but whenever it is that you're eating your first meal, that's what I'm calling breakfast.
Right.
You want that to be something that has plenty of fat, a good amount of protein, and some carbohydrate. But you should be getting to lunch feeling hungry, but okay.
Not like ravenous, like, man, I'm starving.
Right. And that may mean making your meals larger than you're used to. If you're used to having 6 mini meals, and you want to make that switch to 3 meals, you're going to have to make those meals larger, possibly even twice as large. But that's a really good way to gauge, if your blood sugar is off or you're feeling dizzy or lightheaded, you probably have not had enough, or you've had the wrong type of food at the previous meal.
Got it. So you're saying, hey, listen, man, whether you go with 3, it comes back to like make sure you're getting enough nourishment in the body that day. So you're saying, listen, if you want to have 5 meals a day, have your 5 meals a day. If you're going to have your 3, have your 3, but make sure you're getting enough nourishment during the day. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just play devil's advocate, because I know plenty of entrepreneurs who do this. They'll have their breakfast, right? Breakfast, and they're probably not getting enough calories, but maybe let's just give them benefit of the doubt. Big breakfast, right? Healthy breakfast. The whole day goes by. They just get caught up in work. The whole day goes by. They don't eat again till 6, 7 at night. And again, they have a nice, bigger dinner, but it's healthy. What's your thoughts on that?
I would say that probably it's good to for some people, they literally need to physically set an alarm. So even if it's 6 hours out from breakfast, so if breakfast is at 8 o'clock, right, and 2 o'clock rolls around, there should be some little beep or alert or something that's just saying, again, it doesn't have to be a big meal, but something in between.
Got it. Okay.
Because, go 12 hours, it's doable, but you probably are not having optimal energy as you would if you had something in between.
So, okay. So what I'm getting at here is it's not recommended. So, I mean, no. Eat something in there. Otherwise, your energy levels might. So get something in there. I mean,
generally, and the gauge is generally every 4 to 6 hours during the day. I mean, obviously overnight, you're going to be having a fast of 12 hours, 14 hours, sometimes even 16 hours. But during the day, when you're up and about and active, even if you're sitting at your desk, your mind is working, all of that stuff. And you do need energy. So
absolutely.
I would say not to go longer than 4 to 6 hours.
4 to 6 hours, perfect. I love that. So little nuggets of takeaway. You want to go your 3 times a day, and I know plenty of people who like that. Like, I just want to go back to 3 times a day. Do it. But like Brooke said, hey, every 4 to 6, you got to be having something. So it can't be, hey, I'm going to have something at 6 a.m. and then not till 2. I mean, you got to have something within 4 or 6 hours to keep your energy stable. Thanks for that, Brooke. That was awesome. Let's get away from food for a quick second. To one of I think it's like my nemesis. And I've gotten better with it, but I still it's definitely a challenge when it comes to water. What's your take on the importance of drinking water, staying hydrated? What's your take on the importance of drinking water? And then I got one more question to back that up. What can we get away with? And maybe I'm asking selfishly, what can we get away with on a daily basis? Like, hey, you got to at least have 40 ounces or 60. What's your take on those 2 questions?
So I think water is important for a lot of reasons. When you're even slightly dehydrated, your body's not functioning at its greatest capacity. So, you start to feel a little bit more tired, lethargic, fatigued, headachy, all of those kinds of things. If you're not peeing regularly, that's a sign that you might not be getting enough water. And a lot of times too, if you're eating foods that are very dehydrating, like any kind of caffeinated beverages or things like that, you're actually depleting your body even more, because those foods can be, the beverages can be diuretics. So, if you're operating from a place of not drinking enough water, you might not even notice how good you feel when you start to drink water. So I think it's important just to kind of keep your body functioning at its best. I think in terms of weight management, people often mistake thirst for hunger. So that's another thing. That's why I always say if you think you're hungry, have 1 or 2 glasses of water first and just kind of reassess.
Right.
Maybe it was just that thirst. As far as what you can get away with, it depends. I would say probably 6 to 8 cups. Some people could probably get away with 6 cups if they're not very active. But if you are active, and you're sweating and all that, you will notice if you do not drink enough water, like I said, you will get, migraine headache. It just feel awful. So I think one of the best ways to combat this is to keep water bottles, whether they're, reusable or disposable, everywhere, keep some in your car, or even have a goal. Like, you could sometimes, and I tell this to clients all the time, if you buy a larger water bottle, that in and of itself can really help you to drink more. Because if you just buy little, 8 or 16 ounce water bottles, it's like, oh, I had the whole water, but it's only, 1 or 2 cups.
Right.
Whereas if you buy like a 40 ounce, right then and there, you've gotten 5 cups of water.
I love that idea. And I love that idea I love that. First of all, thanks for all that. I love that last idea. And actually I do that myself. Because, and I think this, and I could be wrong here, but from an entrepreneurial standpoint, we're kind of like, we're built a certain way. We're very competitive. We want to get stuff done. And that's actually what's helped me tremendously. I've actually bought a gallon of water and I keep it in the fridge. And to me, it becomes, now it's like a game. It's a challenge. Like,
right.
Can I finish that gallon throughout the day? And it's like me against the gallon. And it's like,
exactly.
Now it's like more. So before it's like, oh, I got to get my water in. Now it's like, no, and here's an even funnier piece. I'll tell you, it's become a little bit. Again, it's all in good nature. It's become a little competitive with myself and my girlfriend. She keeps her, Kristen. She keeps her gallons. So we're both looking at each other's gallons, like, oh, she's ahead of me. So then I'm trying to. Awesome. So even though we're not really talking about it, we're really kind of trying to race each other. So but that's a great. I absolutely love that suggestion. That's a great one. It's worked for me, guys, personally, and I love it, Brooke. So you're saying, so if I heard correctly, 6 to 8 glasses. That's 48 to 64 ounces or so. Yeah. You want to hang in between there somewhere, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, a lot of people are going to need more than that if they're active. But I would say probably 6 cups minimum. You are, and the other thing to remind is if you're eating a healthy diet, lots of fruits and vegetables, yogurts, things like that, you are getting some fluids, just fruits, vegetables. Some of those things are 95% water. So if you're having a cucumber, that's almost like having a little bit of water.
Right.
And same thing with soups and things like that. So those things all factor in, even tea.
Sure.
I mean, yes, it has some diuretic properties if it's caffeinated, but you're still getting some fluid intake there.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So you're going to get fluid intake from alternate sources, which whether you know it or not, but still, guys, try to stick within that 48 to 64 ounce range on a daily basis. I think we can definitely do that. Like
along the same lines of what you were saying with the competitiveness, you can. What I've done is bought a water bottle that's a decent size, and then just kind of challenged myself to have a full water bottle before lunch and before dinner, so that twice a day, you're getting your water, and kind of it's automatically being spread out throughout the day. Yeah. So that's another way. If people are feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to gulp, half a gallon now, they can just challenge themselves to, drink one water bottle full, like in between each meal.
I like that a lot. Yeah, like I actually like that a lot because I found myself in that situation myself where it's the end of the night and I'm like, oh my God, I want to get this done because I said I would, and I'm slamming a bunch of water, then I'm waking up 3 times, 4 times.
Exactly, yeah.
So guys, spread it out throughout the day. I like that a lot. Maybe even give yourself, certain time frames during the day. I'll have this, finished by this time. So that's an excellent suggestion.
And you want to try to stop drinking an hour and a half before bedtime.
Hour and a half. Okay, that's good to know too. Hour and a half before bedtime.
Yes.
All right, guys, have your water, consumption done. Hour and a half before bedtime. I like that. Brooke, let's go back. I know we're jumping all over the place. I appreciate you dealing with me here. Let's go back to food, but now let's kind of get away from the natural nutrition. When it comes to processed foods, right? We hear it all the time. Try to stay away from processed, and I subscribe to that myself. And if you're going to have processed, right? If you're going to have processed food, is there any food that's processed that is good? That's like, hey, if you're going to have processed food, have this because it's not that bad. What's your thoughts?
Some of the bars out there are really decent, and I would consider that a processed food. But like the Rise bars, RISE, are excellent. The Perfect bars are really good. Those are refrigerated. It's processed food because it's a bar made of multiple ingredients, but those kinds of things. So I would say some of the bars are excellent. What's not okay in my mind, are hormone and antibiotic laden foods. So the really, really processed meats that have all the phosphates and nitrates and just, injected with crap, those kinds of things, like the really bad hot dogs and stuff like that, those would be things that you want to really, really try to limit. And then also just trans fats. So anything, those are the ones that are really, really bad for your heart. So people always think fats are bad for your heart. In my mind, it's actually excess carbs and excess sugar that's worse in terms of heart disease risk overall. But when it comes to trans fats, those are bad for your heart. And those are just shelf-stable fats. Anything where you see hydrogenated oil or partially hydrogenated oil on an ingredient label is something to just stay away from completely. So those would be like your stick margarines, or a lot of times, packaged donuts and cupcakes and like Twinkies and things like that.
Right.
And then the other thing would just be artificial sweeteners. So, you'll find them in gum, mint, candy, but all of those sugar-free things or diet soda, those are actually neurotoxins, and they really mess not only with your metabolism, they're actually correlated with obesity, even though they're diet. And they also set you up for insulin resistance because they create this hyper sweetness. So your body, even though it's not taking in any calories, it's so sweet that your body's response is, oh, there's going to be food following this. So it secretes insulin, but then there's nothing there. So not only do you get hungrier, it actually creates hunger, but you also end up with insulin resistance. And then, that can lead to a whole host of other problems. So staying away from the artificial sweeteners. And those, what I mean by that are things like aspartame, so NutraSweet, sucralose, which is Splenda, and saccharin, which is like sweet and low, that kind of thing.
I'm glad you said that, because it's something to be said about that, because sometimes you think, oh, this is diet, it's healthier, no sugar, but it's these artificial sweeteners are in it. So that's something to be very, very cautious of. I'm glad you brought that up, Brooke, because it's like, just because it says it's quote unquote healthy or diet or whatever doesn't mean it's good for you. That is such an important component to sometimes you're better off, and I think you and I had this conversation, Brooke, probably last time, sometimes you're better off having the actual natural food than the actual healthier version, because have less of the natural one, and you're way better off than having the same amount of more of the quote-unquote healthy, fat-free one, right?
Right. At least your body knows a little bit better how to respond to that.
That's a huge, huge takeaway, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's a huge takeaway, so thank you for that. Brooke, say those two things, hydrogenated oil. What were those two oils? One more time so I can...
Oh, so any kind of partially hydrogenated oil. So if you see, and there's a marketing loophole there, because if a product has less than half a gram of trans fats per serving, they can list it as 0 grams. So you might, for example, see a box of crackers that says no trans fat or trans fat free, but then you see on the ingredients it says partially hydrogenated oil. That's because there's still a small amount in there. They just had a little loophole where there's not a lot. But if you have 5 servings of crackers, which most people do, they don't usually stick to 1 serving, you end up with quite a bit.
Sure. Just be just not mindful, but just be aware. Just be aware what you can and can't. Well, not can and can't do. You can do anything you want, but just be aware for the most part what's healthy, what's not. And I think for the most part we know that, but it's just being honest, being truthful. And for the most part we know, like you said earlier, you said, hey, a nice nutritional bar over here that you just mentioned, or a Twinkie. I mean, it's like, right. I don't think there's I don't think we have to debate that one for too long.
Well, and one of the easiest things is, was this a food 50 years ago? So if you could have found it in your grandmother's house 50 years ago, probably more likely going to be okay than, something that has all these ingredients, because they didn't have all those stabilizers and dough conditioners and all those things that they have now.
Right. There's a good way to kind of gauge it. Was this around 50 years ago? If not, it's out.
Is it a real food or not?
It's exactly right. You touched upon, you said something, Brooke, and I actually want to go to that subject, because you said, hey, that's what kind of the weight gain and, et cetera comes in. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about, because sometimes, we think we're doing well with eating, and, we get carried away. We stop working, like myself, I can take myself as an example. Entrepreneurs, we're kind of obsessive. We want to get our work done, and we're excited about what we're doing and working on. And, luckily for me, I'm just constantly active. So, but someone who's more just at their desk, 14, 15 hours, they're just working at their business, and there's a tendency, for the weight gain to kind of come on. If you could, Brooke, if someone who's hey man, I need to lose some pounds, I need to lose 15, 20 pounds because it's, I put it on over 6 months, get my business off the ground. What's three ideas or three concepts, 3 ways they can immediately start losing weight? Just quick, practical, effective ways they can start, not get there tomorrow, but start with that process of losing the weight.
I think number 1 would be sleep. So sleep is really correlated with weight management. So basically, for the most part, the more you sleep up to a certain amount, we're not talking like necessarily 10 hours a night, but between 8, sometimes even 9 hours a night. If you look at pro athletes, they sleep like 10 hours a night plus naps, I mean, that time is recovery. It's really, people think of it as like wasted time, but it's really not. That's when your body repairs itself. So, and it's almost like taking out the trash. So getting a good night's sleep is like emptying your body's trash. So your system just cannot function optimally. And I mean, I'm talking for someone, I've survived on very little sleep for a lot of years. So I'm not saying that I'm not preaching from like, that I get 10 hours sleep every night, but there really is something to be said for getting adequate sleep in weight management. It also affects your hunger hormones. So they've done studies where people who get like 4 or 5 hours of sleep over a course of a week, on average weigh quite a bit more than people who get, 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And then also, again, back to quality of sleep. So just because you're in bed doesn't mean that you're necessarily sleeping. So creating an environment where, you're relaxed, it's really, really dark, whether that means getting like blackout shutters or just keeping it dark, windows completely closed and blinds down, cool temperature. So like around 68 degrees, maybe even a little cooler if you can tolerate it. All of those things really, really help. And just having a routine. So not going to bed at midnight one night, 9 p.m. the next night, kind of keeping it consistent. Generally, like in Ayurvedic medicine, they usually recommend, going to bed around 10 p.m., waking around 6 a.m., somewhere like that. So that would be number one. Number two would be what we touched on before, adequate water intake. That's huge. And then number three would be really just cutting back on sugar. If there's one thing to cut back on, I would say it's sugar. Definitely. But I also wanted to say, and this is not like a fourth thing, but overall, having the right mindset. Because,
Absolutely.
I've talked about this too, but if you have that belief that you can lose weight and that you will lose weight, you're setting yourself up to actually do it, as opposed to, I've never been able to do that. I'm lazy, I'm not disciplined, it's never going to work, that kind of thing.
I love everything you said there for so many reasons. I'm just going to highlight the one or two things. Is I love what you just said, because usually the thought that comes to mind whenever it's like, hey man, I need to lose some pounds. It's like, man, but I'm not, I don't have the time to get to the gym or whatever. And not to say exercise isn't important, but I love what you just said, Brooke, is like the top three things you can implement immediately. Like you don't need to go get a gym membership. You just say, hey man, start sleeping more. And guess what? Not only will that aid or contribute to the weight loss, that's actually going to give you more energy to be more effective and more cognitive, do better work for your business. So man, you're killing two birds with one stone right there. The second one you just said, and again, you said nothing about working out again or eating. You said just have your water, man. So two immediate things we can do that you have to do anyways. It's just like, well, you don't have to have water, but that you can do today, right now, as soon as you want to. And then the last one, the sugar piece. In your opinion, in your experience, Brooke, what's the biggest culprit when you see sugar? Is there one or two things that's the biggest culprit what people have, and maybe they're not aware of that? It's like, man, there's actually a lot of sugar in that.
Drinks, alcohol.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's the next segue, because I want to talk about that. Okay, guys, let's just recap real quickly. You want to start losing, look, if we're losing, shed a couple of pounds here, get more sleep, like you said, 7-8 hours a night. More water, 48 to 64, like we talked about earlier. The more the better. And then lastly, watch those sugars. Watch those sugars, which you just said, which I just asked. Well, what's the biggest culprit? And that's actually, it's funny because I wanted to ask about that, because listen, man, entrepreneurs, we work hard, but then we want to go, mingle. We want to go networking events. If you're doing well, you're traveling, you're going out and trying out new, latest, coolest bar. There's alcohol involved. I'd be lying to say I like alcohol. I have my wine, and so how does that contribute? Like, I guess, how does the world of having cocktails and being social, how can we balance that with being healthy? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, cocktails, the thing with cocktails is that many of them tend to be super high in sugar. So I think, and we kind of talked about this before, but I think the healthiest alcoholic beverage is red wine, just because it does have some nutritional value in terms of antioxidants, and it's much less processed than than having like a rum and Coke or something like that. But I guess there's a few things. The calories add up really fast, and they're pretty empty calories, so you're not really giving yourself any benefit. We also become a lot less inhibited around other food when we do drink, and it doesn't fill you up. It doesn't provide you with any fiber or protein or anything like that. And because the sugars are high, again, you're going to kind of create that insulin response. So, and you tend to want more. So a lot of times people don't stop with just one drink. They have, 4 or 5 drinks. And I guess what I saw, this was years and years ago. I used to work in a weight management clinic, and what I noticed over and over and over again is people would do so well during the week, or, they felt like they were on plan, and then the weekend would come and they would just have 4 or 5 drinks, 1 or 2 nights during the weekend, and all their progress would be kind of gone. It was really disheartening for me, because I was like, you're doing so well, and I think that the one thing that seems to really trip people up, because they don't recognize it as sugar, are the alcoholic drinks.
Okay, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Now let's put this into practical, and this is the very first one we said at the beginning. Practical. We know if it's gonna happen. It's like, hey, if you're going to go have a couple of drinks or whatever, one is like, how many would you say is okay? Like would you say, hey, glass of wine per day is okay? If you're on the weekends, if you're gonna have a drink or two with your friends, like have this drink or have this many. Like what's like if we were to say, hey, having no drinks is not an option. It's going to happen. Yeah. What would it be?
So definitely better to spread it out than to binge drink it all in one night. So if you're going to have, for example, 7 drinks throughout the week, way better to have 1 drink a day than obviously like 7 on Saturday and nothing the rest of the week. So that's number one. But because all this has to be, again, processed by your liver. So, and your liver kind of recognizes alcohol as somewhat of a poison. It has to process it. It's really challenging to do that. I think for some people, if the rest of your diet is really balanced and you want a glass of red wine every night, it's okay. I wouldn't say it's the best choice, but red wine, I would say, is the best choice as far as alcohol goes if you're going to have a drink. And then the other thing is just kind of like we talked about with food, is just to plan it. So, for example, if you know that you're going to go out during the weekend and you want to drink, probably better to just plan that ahead of time and say, okay, I'm going to have 1 or 2 drinks during the weekend, and then I'm not going to drink during the week. Or if you're having, if your plan is to have a glass of red wine, during the weekdays, then not more than like 1 drink during the weekend. Just kind of keep it to a minimum if you can.
Yeah, I like the huge word. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Huge word in this plan. Spread it out, like you said. Hey guys, if you're like, hey, don't have more than 7 or whatever, you don't want to. I'm going to save them all for Saturday night. Yeah. Try to spread them out as best you can. Have the red wine. That's probably your best option, because of there's actually is some antioxidants. There's some benefit there, if you will. We'll call it that. And then lastly, I love that last one you said, Brooke. Is just play. If you go in with a plan, you're more up to be successful. I know I chat with my clients like, hey, what are you doing? Okay, I'm going out. Okay, go in with a plan, because if you go in like, I'll just try to be good, then it's like, well, what does good mean? Good could be like, well, I usually have 8. I'm going to have 6 instead. Go in with a plan, like I'm gonna have 2, and after that I'm gonna switch to whatever it may be. But I love that, bro. Go in with a plan, and that's huge to bring up. Like we don't want to take away. Look, of course, go have a cocktail too. We don't want to take away from the fun, from you work hard. Sure, go have a cocktail, fine, or a glass of wine. But just keep it. Isn't it just like anything else? Like food, keep it all in moderation. Everything in balance. Moderate it. I think we'll be okay.
I just want to say one more thing with alcohol is that, and this goes for food too, but especially with alcohol, if you can hold yourself accountable by telling someone else ahead of time. So especially if you're going out with a group of people, tell someone, hey, make sure that I don't have more than 1 or 2 drinks. That is super helpful, because otherwise the night gets away from you. You kind of forget, you let it go. But if you have someone there who will hold you accountable, let them know ahead of time for whatever reason. You don't even have to give an explanation, but just say, look, I don't want to have more than 1 or 2 drinks.
I love that. That's actually what I do with my own clients. I say, hey, what's your plan? Yeah. And then because they tell me, that's the accountability factor. And actually, I'll say one more thing on that too, Brooke. It's kind of cool, just because that's how we're built as humans. When you say you're going to do something, there's this tendency that we want to stick to what we say we're going to do. So like, hey, I said I'm going to have 2. Like, you're almost more inclined to stick to it because you said that's what you were going to do. So there's a lot of power behind that. So I like that a lot. So yeah, so tell someone. So that's another big piece that we can take away. Big takeaway piece. Tell someone, ask, your friend, unless your friend's like not going to help, maybe call me or call Brooke, but otherwise, yeah, tell someone.
And you can even, if you're in a situation where you don't trust someone, you can even, on your own, sometimes just literally writing it out, like whether it's a contract or just writing, I'm only going to have 1 drink, keep it in your wallet so that it's there. Because,
Yeah.
like I said, during the night, you can kind of feel like, oh, it's not as important. But if you wrote it at a time that it was important and you can kind of revisit that later, it's really helpful.
I love that. That's a biggie. I mean, that's just like, that's real world. And the reason why I'm really happy to talk about that, because that's real world. To sit here and talk about it's not going to happen, well, we'd be lying. But Brooke, this has been awesome. And I'm so excited for you taking the time to answer these questions, just because, there's something to be said. I always say this, and pardon a bit of French here. I always say, hey man, listen, eat like shit, feel like shit.
Right.
And eat awesome, feel awesome. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple formula. So that is why I was so happy to have you on here, because like this is all important stuff. You've given us crazy amount of info here as far as and again, it's like practical. The biggie for me is like, it has to be practical. It has to be easy. If it's too tough, like, hey, go get these 16 recipes, and chances are I'm not going to do it, and others aren't going to. You made it practical, easy, and the biggie is it has to be effective. And everything you just shared with us is big time effective. You know what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is can you share where people can, if they want to just connect with you? And actually, before you share that, I have to give huge props to you, and I'm going to suggest everyone follow you on Instagram, because you put up some crazy, awesome like recipes. One, they just look pretty as heck, but then they're just crazy, awesome ideas for like healthy recipes. So, guys, if you're not following Brooke, what's the Instagram account? Brooke Joanna?
It's at Brooke Joanna. So BROOKEJOANNA.
At Brooke Joanna. Follow Brooke. Trust me, you won't regret it. I can't hit like enough. But other than that, Brooke, how can people, if people want to learn more, just connect with you, learn more about you, what you're up to, what you're doing, how can they learn about you?
Yeah, they can email me at Brooke Joanna, so BROOKEJOANNA @gmail.com. And I'm also happy to give out my cell number if people want to call me or text with a question or make contact. 619-206-8022. Again, it's 619-206-8022.
That's awesome. That's really cool for you, given offering that up. Listen, guys, I've been, like I said, I've worked with Brooke now. Brooke, it's literally been over 10 years. You realize that it's been a long time. And it's awesome every time, just because of one, you just think Brooke's just the nicest person, but your knowledge is insanely awesome. So the fact that you took this time, mother of two, plenty on your plate, taking the time to share with us this crazy, awesome knowledge. Thank you so much, Brooke. You're awesome. I appreciate it.
No problem. I'm happy to anytime.
Thank you, Brooke. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
Okay, take care.
Cheers.